God is dead. You've probably heard this famous sentence by Friedrich Nietzsche before, but what does it actually mean? In this video, we will find out what this sentence means and what consequences the death of God has for people and society. Friedrich Nietzsche is a German philologist and philosopher. He is born in 1844 as the son of a Protestant pastor in Prussia and is brought up as a strict Lutheran. When Nietzsche is 5 years old, his father dies, followed a year later by his younger brother Ludwig Joseph. The family moves, and from 1850 to 1856, Nietzsche lives in an all-female household with his mother, his sister Elizabeth, his grandmother, 2 unmarried aunts, and the maid. Nietzsche is a very good student. In his free time, he writes poetry and composes. In 1864, Nietzsche begins studying classical philology and Protestant theology at the University of Bonn. He is fascinated by the works of the young Hegelians and reads The Essence of Christianity by Ludwig Feuerbach, among others. After just 1 semester, he drops out of his theology studies. In 1865, he transfers to the University of Leipzig. The young Nietzsche is particularly impressed by the philosophy of Schopenhauer, but later distances himself from his pessimism and compassionate ethics. In 1869, at the age of 24, Nietzsche becomes an associate professor of classical philology at the University of Basel. In Basel, he renounces his Prussian citizenship and remains stateless from then on. 10 years later, Nietzsche has to end his teaching career for health reasons. From this point on, he undertakes many trips, especially to Italy and Switzerland, because he hopes that the climate there would have a beneficial effect on his various illnesses. From the age of 45, Nietzsche suffers from increasing mental disorders and spends the rest of his life as a nursing case, first in the care of his mother and then his sister. He dies in 1900 at the age of 55. In his work, Nietzsche sharply criticizes morality, religion, philosophy, science, and certain forms of art. He criticizes Christianity in particular. Nietzsche does not develop a systematic philosophy and often expresses his thoughts in aphorisms, that is, concise, punchy, and witty sentences or fragments of thought, which makes his work difficult to access and allows for different interpretations. He is not only a philosopher, but also a poet, and deliberately uses poetic and powerful language. His criticism of religion can be found above all in the works The Gay Science, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and The Antichrist. The most famous passage in Nietzsche's critique of religion is Aphorism 125, the parable of the madman, in his book The Gay Science. The sentence, God is dead, also appears here for the first time. Let's take a look at this famous parable together. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, I seek God! I seek God! As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Has he got lost? Asked one. Did he lose his way like a child? Asked another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage? Emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. Whither is God? He cried. I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually? Backward, sideward, forward, in all directions. Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying, as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the gravediggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? Gods, too, decompose. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever is born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will belong to a higher history than all history hitherto. Here the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last he threw his lantern on the ground, and it broke into pieces and went out. "I have come too early," he said then. "My time is not yet. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds, though done, still require time to be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." It has been related further that on the same day the madman forced his way into several churches, and there struck up his Requiem Aeternam Deo. Led out and called to account, he is said always to have replied nothing but, "What after all are these churches now if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God?" In the story, a crazy man walks into the marketplace in broad daylight with a lantern looking for God. He asks the people, but they only make fun of him. He tries to make them understand that they now have to completely redefine their own existence. The civilized world has largely destroyed its previous spiritual and moral foundations. With the death of God, the basis of Christian values, which provided support and orientation, disappears. But the madman reaps only incomprehension and ridicule. Because the people in the marketplace have not yet understood what it means to live without God, that is, without the foundation of their previous morality. They do not understand the opportunities and burdens that the death of God brings with it. It will take a long time for people to realize the significance of this event. And what does the sentence, "God is dead," mean for Nietzsche? God is dead. Nietzsche. Nietzsche is dead. God. You've probably heard this classic in connection with Nietzsche before. This response to Nietzsche's sentence, often from religious people, makes it clear how misunderstandings and misinterpretations can arise when thoughts are abbreviated and taken out of context. The missing context changes the meaning of the sentence in such a way that it no longer corresponds to what Nietzsche meant by it. For Nietzsche did not simply want to claim that God is dead, nor did he wish for the death of God. Rather, he saw himself as an observer of the social circumstances of his time and realized that many people thought God was dead and no longer believed in him. The fact that God is dead was no longer a new or revolutionary idea in the 19th century. Many people questioned religion and the existence of God. The natural sciences and historical science in particular have contributed to making the Christian worldview untrustworthy. Nietzsche recognized that Christian civilization had developed cracks. With the death of God, the values of society have lost their content. They are no longer valid for the world in which people live, as God no longer exists as the supreme guarantor of these values. The death of God has two sides. On the one hand, this frees people from guilt and moral burdens. They are no longer accountable to anyone and do not have to answer for their actions before the last judgment at the end of their lives. This freedom can lead to self-determination and sovereignty. People can now free themselves from the alienating power of religion and become the creators of their own existence and their own values. Secondly, people must now set their own values. At first glance, this does not seem so difficult, but according to Nietzsche, this is only because Christian values still exist. To stay with the image of the parable, it is not yet dark in the marketplace. Therefore, people do not yet understand the extent of the consequences that the death of God will have. Above all, Nietzsche emphasizes the consequences that the death of God has for morality. In his view, Christianity conveys a slave morality to people with values such as charity and compassion. It is also hostile to life in that it directs all human endeavors towards the afterlife. The death of God can now lead to a revaluation of all values. This catchphrase is a central concept in Nietzsche's philosophy and moral criticism. According to Nietzsche, such a revaluation of all values has already occurred once in history, namely by the Jewish people during their existence as slaves in Egypt. This was a transformation of all ancient values. While the ancient Greeks and Romans built a world empire through creativity, courage, pride, toughness, vitality, ruthlessness, fighting spirit, and determination, the Jewish slaves were characterized by obedience, modesty, humility, compassion, patience, charity, and a willingness to make sacrifices. The aristocratic master morality is replaced by an attitude of slave morality. This phenomenon can be illustrated using the two pairs of terms, good and bad and good and evil. The successful and strong person evaluates out of himself. He considers himself good, and those who are inferior to him and who do not succeed in life as well as he does bad. For him, bad is the opposite of good. He does not know the word evil. Such an evaluation corresponds to the so-called master morality. However, the oppressed person must make a different assessment from his weak and inferior perspective. The strong, the successful one who oppresses him is evil. From this assessment, he then looks at himself. He himself, who has to ally himself with other weak and oppressed people in order to defend himself against the strong, is good. According to Nietzsche, God underpins this slave morality as an omnipotent creator by declaring it to be the only valid morality. He assures the Jews of his support and love, rewards their weakness and forbearance by leading them out of oppression, and thus places them above the strong and successful in the world. In the New Testament, God then extends his promise to all people through Jesus Christ. And through the worldwide spread of Christianity, Christian slave morality also spreads throughout the world. For Nietzsche, Christian values are not only the values explicitly mentioned in the Bible, but all values that focus on compassion and the well-being of weak people. According to Nietzsche, they are also behind most modern ideas, such as democracy and feminism. The Christian-influenced slave morality is basically motivated by envy. Nietzsche speaks of resentment. Because one cannot surpass one's fellow human beings in power and ability, one demands modesty, charity, and humility. But these values are harmful. They generate feelings of guilt and are hostile to life. According to Nietzsche, Christianity has created a morality of weakness, promotes and cultivates pity, corrupts the character of man with concepts such as guilt, sin, atonement, and humility, shifts the power of man from this world to the hereafter, and harms man with its hostility towards the body, as this suppresses his feelings, instincts, and effects. However, slave morality with its Christian values has now lost its foundation with the death of God, even if, as described in the parable of the madman, it will still take a while before the consequences of this become apparent. Nietzsche fights against Christianity because it prevents people from developing into something higher. It also prevents the higher, the strong and successful, people from ruling and spreading their values. Christianity as a classic slave morality creates an equality of all people. It no longer allows strong values and prevents strong people from developing. For Nietzsche, not all people are the same. The higher people differ from the masses in their strength of will, their depth of feeling, and their thoughtfulness. At the beginning of their lives, they initially adopt many of the values of their time and take them very seriously. Their longing for profound truth and their yearning for infinity make them particularly susceptible to belief in God. For Nietzsche, after the death of God, these higher people are the hope of giving human beings dignity. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche attempts to free them from Christian morality and encourage them to find and cultivate their own values. In his late work in particular, Nietzsche strongly criticizes traditional Christian moral concepts, but also the modern egalitarian concept of man. According to Nietzsche, Christian slave morality keeps people small and puts the weak in the foreground. All people are equal before God. In this value system, justice means that all people have an inviolable dignity, a right to well-being, and so on. For Nietzsche, on the other hand, justice means to each his own. Human dignity, the dignity that every human being has, does not exist without God. There are strong people and weak people. The weak have come to power through Christianity. They prevent the higher people from enforcing their own value system. For this reason, Nietzsche wants to promote a second revaluation of all values, although he is aware that such an upheaval entails dangers. So it is actually good news that God is dead, as a new re-evaluation of values can now take place. With God, all the values that Christianity stands for are also dead. That is obedience, modesty, humility, compassion, patience, charity, and willingness to make sacrifices. These values limit strong people in the development of their potential. Now, the strong can realize his values, creativity, courage, pride, toughness, vitality, ruthlessness, fighting spirit, and determination. Only now can life, the will to power, unfold its primal force. The strong should prevail, and the weak should perish. This is in the spirit of life and is necessary. According to Nietzsche, justice and weak values such as compassion or charity have no place in nature or in life. The fact that the strong prevail and the weak perish ultimately also leads to an improvement of the human being towards the Superman. The Superman is the sovereign master of his life and is not limited by religion or morality. Nietzsche writes, "All gods are dead. Now we want the Superman to live." But why is the madman so horrified and stunned when he searches for God in the marketplace and asks about the consequences of his death? The reason for this is the imminent danger that he recognizes. The danger that the death of God brings with it is nihilism. Nihilism is a philosophical view that considers everything that exists to be void and meaningless and negates all values, norms, and moral concepts. Nihilism wipes away the entire horizon, to stay with the image of the parable of the madman. Nietzsche uses this metaphor to illustrate the drama of secularization. We have already seen that with the death of God, the fixed value system established by him, which defines good and evil and provides orientation, has also been lost. Without God, there is no longer an objective standard, no human dignity, and therefore no infinite value of human life. All that remains is the human being in a meaningless world. They must now decide for themselves what should be and where to go. The horror of the madman in the marketplace illustrates Nietzsche's concern about this situation. For Nietzsche is of the opinion that most people are better at obeying than commanding. In his view, man is already a herd animal by virtue of his natural history. The slave morality is not only due to Christianity. Humans have always felt a natural inclination towards herd mentality, in which the strong are oppressed by the masses of the weak. Christianity has reinforced this natural tendency. Without a common belief in a God, people will therefore be overwhelmed by the situation. Structures that provided support and orientation, such as institutions and general moral concepts, and therefore also social cohesion, will fall apart. This decay of structures will also entail political dangers. Since people want to obey and cannot orient themselves, they will probably gratefully follow any leader. People's lack of orientation can be exploited by strong but wayward souls to dominate the masses. Nietzsche sees the danger that people will now turn to substitute religions and false idols, such as nationalism or socialism. Another problem is that people are superficial and accept many things without question. Busyness and entertainment prevent people from thinking more deeply, searching for meaning, and striving for something higher. This makes independent orientation impossible. Through this superficiality, they retain their old Christian values and mix them with an optimism about progress that promises an increasingly pain-free and comfortable life. In the end, such a life becomes the ideal itself. As a petty bourgeois member of consumer society, man regresses to the worm. The aim of Nietzsche's efforts is to overcome nihilism and combat the worthlessness of life. If God is dead, man must give life, and therefore his own existence, its own value. To do this, they must free themselves from the values of others and from the remnants of Christian values. Nietzsche's fight against religion, and explicitly against Christianity, is therefore not an end in itself, but serves to create space for new values by abolishing the old Christian values. Nihilism is an intermediate stage between the old Christian slave morality, which is to be completely abolished, and a new master morality that man creates for himself. According to Nietzsche, cultures with their religion and morals only protect the weak who are not strong enough to endure life itself. The revaluation of all values creates a new world in which new, better people triumph as creators of their own values. Nietzsche's fascination with the strong human being, who is not weakened by Christian morality, leads to the idea of the Superman. The Superman fights passionately and full of sacrifice for his own values and the development of his potential. He is independent of the opinions of others and loves life. He knows no generally binding morals, but defines his own values. Two objections in particular are often raised against Nietzsche's critique of religion and morality. Nietzsche is a politically incorrect thinker and provocateur who questions fundamental things that are taken for granted, such as that all people are equal and have human dignity. Turning away from these values is difficult, provocative, and irritating. Acceptance of his ideas is made even more difficult by the martial language Nietzsche uses. Terms such as will to power, Superman, slave morality, master morality, herd animal, and so on irritate and provoke the reader then and now. The second frequent objection is directed more against the appropriation of Nietzsche's ideas than against Nietzsche himself. In particular, the idea of the Superman was instrumentalized and misinterpreted by National Socialism and transhumanism. The Superman was understood by the National Socialists as a biologically superior master man. Today's transhumanists see it as a call for personal perfection and human enhancement, for example, through genetic modification. As mentioned at the beginning, Nietzsche's work leaves a lot of room for different interpretations, partly due to the special poetic writing style. How do you personally interpret the parable of the madman? And, do you think that the consequences of the death of God Nietzsche describes are plausible?